I've had homeowners reach out to me involving ceiling height or area of a room, asking me, maybe they're finishing their basement and they're like, hey, it's not, very tall. Am I allowed to finish it? Or I just want to add a bedroom. It'll fit a bed and I have an egress window. How big does it have to be? Well, the code actually does cover that. Rooms have to be a certain size and ceiling heights need to be tall enough that you're not knocking your head or slouched down the whole time. But sometimes that can't be helped. And so I'm going to go through the code and then I'll kind of tell you what is generally realistic, at least in my area, and would probably hold true wherever you're at as well. But before we dive into the code, I want to give the definition here. This is out of the IRC for what habitable space is. So habitable space is a space in a building for living, sleeping, eating, or cooking. Okay, so that would be any bedrooms, that would be any living rooms, rec rooms, or kitchens. And then it says bathrooms, toilet rooms, closets, halls, storage, or utility spaces are not considered habitable space. So as we go through the definitions here or the code reference on ceiling heights and room size, it's going to talk about habitable space. So they're really just talking about bedrooms, living rooms, rec rooms, and kitchens when they talk about habitable space. But they do define uninhabitable space as far as ceiling height is concerned. Just so you kind of have an idea. So when you get into this, you're like, well, what's habitable space? Well, it actually does define specific rooms. So ceiling height. Let's talk about ceiling height first. Okay, so maybe you got a basement that you're finishing, or you've got maybe you've got a shop and you want to put like some type of living quarters up above, but you only have, maybe you got 14-foot walls, and by the time you put your floor in there, you don't have a very high ceiling. Can you do it, right? So habitable space, hallways and portions of basements containing these spaces shall have a ceiling height of not less than 7 feet. So here they're specifically telling you that you need to have 7-foot high ceilings. And they're talking about basements containing these spaces shall have a ceiling height. So you've got this basement, you bought this house, you got this basement, and you want to finish it. Maybe it's unfinished or part of it's unfinished, and you go down there and you put your tape up there, and it's 6'10", and you're like, well, I'm here to tell you that maybe the code book tells you that you have to be 7 feet, and if you were building something new, yes, you need to be 7 feet, but you can't lift your whole house up, and I don't think there's any jurisdiction in the world that would tell you need to lift your whole house up in order to finish your basement. If you get down into just this, the terminology of it, they might say, well, this isn't considered habitable space because it's not 7 feet. But if you're ever to go to sell it, I highly doubt that the realtor would not put on there that you have a bedroom in the basement if it has an egress window because it's 6'11" or 6'10". Now, if you get into where you're much lower than that and it's actually a crouching issue, well, then that might be something that your inspector would make a determination, or the building official, when you try to finish it. But as it says here in the code, it says bathrooms, toilet rooms, laundry rooms shall have a ceiling height of not less than 6'8". So again, they're showing that's kind of uninhabitable space per the definition, and they're allowing it to be a little bit lower. They're talking about exceptions here. So for rooms with sloped ceilings, so maybe you've got a bonus room and the ceilings slope, right? They kind of come down. They're saying here that the ceiling height can be not less than 5 feet. So when you build what they call wing walls or whatever, maybe they're already existing, and if they're existing, that's fine. But if you were going to build them, you'd want to make sure that they're 5 feet tall. That would be pretty typical. Not less than 50% of that required floor area shall have a ceiling height not less than 7 feet. Again, it's existing house. Maybe you already have the wing walls. You already have your ceiling height. As an inspector, I'm never going to walk in there and be like, well, you can't finish this because you don't have those dimensions. At the end of the day, it's just the terminology thing. It's like, well, technically it doesn't meet the requirement, so it's not considered habitable space. But you finish it off, you put a smoke and a CO detector up there, you've got a egress window. I mean, I'd be putting a bed in there. I wouldn't worry about it. And if I was a realtor, I probably wouldn't go in there and write, if I was going to sell it, I wouldn't write, well, there is a bedroom in the attic that is in a bonus room, but the ceiling height is 6'11". So it's not really a lot to worry about, if that makes sense, unless it's just super short. Here again, they're talking about, exceptions, to the ceiling height. They're just saying you need 6'8", in a 30 by 30 inch area around the shower head. So that's just talking about in your toilet room or in your bathroom around your shower. They have let's see what else they've got. They've got here, it says beams, girders, ducts, and other obstructions in a basement containing habitable space shall be permitted to project within 6'4" of the finished floor. I'm here to tell you, as an inspector, if I walk into a basement and someone's finishing it, I don't very rarely ever throw a tape to the ceiling. It has to feel like it's really short on me before I would start really diving into that. People are going to run ductwork where they have to run ductwork, and that's going to get softened in, right? You're going to end up probably framing it in, or maybe you're just painting it and leaving it exposed, but you got to put your ductwork in. So I've never walked up and been like, oh, the ductwork is 6 feet, not 6'4". Kind of is what it is. Now, I'm telling you this based on how I look at the code book. Your building department may be a little more lax, a little more strict, but in a general sense, it's like you can finish your basement. It's just maybe they don't call it habitable space. But I'll tell you what, if I was moving into it and I needed a bedroom, I'm not going to worry about it being a couple inches too short. So that would kind of cover ceiling heights, right? So keep in mind, 7 foot. That is your big number, right? You want to be 7 feet if you can have it. 7 feet everywhere you go, and you'll be covered. You can get down to this 6'8" or even 6'4" if you got beams and girders. 6'8" in some of these bathrooms or laundry rooms and so on and so forth. What about room size, though? So room size, so we're talking about habitable rooms. So again, we're back to this living room, we're back to this bedroom, and then kitchens. Though it says exemption is kitchens. But it says habitable room shall have a floor area of not less than 70 square feet. And it says habitable room shall be not less than 7 feet in any horizontal dimension. Well, what does that mean? It just means you have to, your minimum room size is 10 by 7. 70 feet, you have to have at least 7 feet on your size. So you could go 8 by 8, right? If you were, 8 by 8 is not going to get you to 70, it's going to get you to 64. So go 8 by 9 maybe, but usually 10 by 7, right? That's kind of what you're looking for, 70 square feet. It's a pretty small room, but you fit a bed in there and you got an egress window, then hey, rock and roll. Just know that I have shown up to houses and someone is, remodeling their house. And I had this one instance where they wanted to put a bedroom like right after you walked in the front door. And then so you walked in, they framed a bedroom over here. There was an existing bedroom over here. And then you kind of walked through this little mini hall and then it opened up into like the living room and the kitchen. It was an older house. And so they just framed this little room in there. And I went and measured it out because they already had a front window that met egress. And for them, it was like, well, this is simple. But they wanted the living room to be as big as possible. Well, I started measuring it all and it wasn't even 70 square feet. So they had to move the walls to make sure they met that requirement for 70 square feet. That is something that would be called by your inspector. I mean, you can't help ceiling height if it's existing. But if you're going and framing in rooms, well, you need to make sure you meet that requirement. Let's see what else it says in here. So again, so minimum dimensions, again, kitchens are exempt. And then here it's talking about, move myself out of the way. So height effect on the room area. So portions of the room within a sloped ceiling measuring less than 5 feet or a furred ceiling measured less than 7 feet from the finished floor to the finished ceiling shall not be considered as contributing to the minimum required habitable area of that room. Okay, that sounds confusing. But essentially what it's saying is like a bonus room upstairs, the part that's part of the 70 square feet that makes the minimum is that 7 feet section, if you have it, right? So if it slopes down on the sides, and it's not per that requirement, then it's not considered part of the calculation, which again, you have an existing situation, you're going to finish it off and you do the best you can. You make it safe. I don't know that anybody's ever going to bug you about it. So, but I want you to know that in case you're doing any room framing, make sure you're over 70 square feet. If you've got issues with ceiling heights, just kind of take into account you do the best you can. Maybe check with your building department, but just know that, I mean, I don't know if anybody is going to tell you have to jack your whole house up 2 inches to meet that requirement. But if you're doing something new, they might be a little more stringent on it. So keep that in mind if you're building like a 2-story and you want to make sure that your upper floor ceiling heights are correct.